Welcome to standard number 3 on the year. The standard is not fraction of a fraction. This is just one part of it. The standard is really not anything new. It's just a combination of the first two. So in the first one we added and subtracted, in the last one we multiplied and divided. And now in this one, it's all going to be combined together. One problem might be adding, one problem might be multiplying. You might have a problem where you have to add and divide. The only thing that's kind of new on this one is a fraction of a fraction. So let me explain to you what that means. Say you got a group and there's 10 things in there. I'll just pick an easy number. So you're starting off with a group of 10 things. And your instructions are to split that group. So somebody says take 3/4 of that group. So you're going to split your big group into two smaller groups. I don't like to say the word split it in half because they're not going to be equal. One of the groups is going to have more than the other. All right, so if you have 3/4 here, it's not going to tell you how much goes here. You're going to have to figure that out for yourself. And to do that, you subtract from 1. All right, the whole is 1. Just kind of like, say you have a pizza and there's 8 pieces of it, and nobody's eaten any of it yet. There's 8 out of 8 pieces left. 8 over 8 reduces to 1. The whole thing is 1. So if you want to know what the other part is, you have to subtract it from 1. So if we want to know how much is in here, we do 1 minus 3/4. And when you subtract with fractions, you have to have a common denominator. So this is actually 1 over 1, and we want the denominator to be 4. So we multiply it by 4, which means we multiply the numerator by 4. So it's 4 over 4 minus 3 over 4 equals 1 over 4. So this would be 1/4. Now most of you could probably do that in your head. You probably know that 3/4 of $1 is 75 cents and 1/4 of $1 is a quarter, and you put those together and you have your whole $1. But you might end up with fractions that are a little bit more difficult. So if you can't figure out what the remaining part of the fraction is to get you back to 1, you can always subtract 1 minus this to figure out what the other part is. All right, and now here's where it gets tricky, because that's the fraction part. You split your group up into two fractions, a fraction of a whole, this part and that part. Now you're taking a fraction of one of those. And of means to multiply. So all these problems, fraction of a fraction, are going to be multiplication problems. On the do section today, I made up my own problems because I couldn't find any on the internet that I liked as much as my own. And they're all multiplication problems because they're all fraction of a fraction. Fraction times a fraction. So you're going to multiply. So it's a 2-step problem. The first step is this. Split your group into two smaller groups, and then take a fraction of one of those groups. So it might say 1/2 of, it won't specifically say a number. So let's say you split your groups up into red and blue. It might say 1/2 of red. So if it says 1/2 of this red group, then you have to multiply 1/2 times 3/4. 3/4 times 1/2 would equal 3/8. So 3/8 of the total amount we started with, which was 10, is red. Well, it'll be a longer sentence than that. So we'll say half of the red group likes school, or something like that. So the question would be then, what fraction of the whole likes red and school? So that's the tricky part to these, is they're all story problems. They're all long, wordy type problems, and you got to figure out what exactly are they trying to ask you here. So in this case, half of the red likes school what fraction likes red and school? Well, 3/4 of them like red. Half of those 3/4 like school. Half of 3/4 is 3/8. 3/4 times 1/2 is equal to 3/8. So that would be the answer to what fraction likes red and school. 3/8 of your original 10 like red and school. Half of your 3/4 like school. If you convert 3/4 into 6/8, it's easier to take half because it's hard to take half of 3. Half of 6 is 3. So half of 6/8, if you have a pizza and there's 6 pieces left, there was 8 pieces to begin with, there's 6 left because somebody ate 2, and you take half of what's remaining, you're going to take 3, half of 6. So half of 6/8 is 3/8, and that was our answer. Half of the red, half of the 3/4 is 3/8. All right, it's all about the wording because this sentence right here is going to dictate: do you take half of the 1/4 or do you take half of the 3/4? This was very specific. It said take half of the red. It's usually not going to be that specific. So let me give you another example where it's not super clear. It doesn't specifically say red or blue. I'm just going to call this a have and a have-nots problem. So let's say there's 12 people. Well, I'm not even going to tell you how many people there are because that doesn't really even matter. You're not trying to find the total amount of people. You're just trying to find the fraction of the total. So it doesn't really even matter how much you're in the group to start with. I just put 10 in there as an example, but that probably didn't even help. So I'm just going to leave that blank. And I'm going to say, just call this the group. That's the entire group. Every problem is going to start with a whole group of something. And then it's going to split it into 2 fractions, 2 smaller groups. So we'll say, of that group, 3/5 have something. So we'll call this the haves group. They have something. And we'll call these the have-nots. Okay, so 3/5 have something, and then of the ones who don't. See how it's not super clear? Of the ones who don't. That means of the ones who don't have something. That would be this group right here. Another way that they could reference this group right here would be of the others. All right, if your first sentence is talking about the haves and they're talking about of the others, they're talking about the have-nots. So this is the tricky part. This is the whole key to these types of problems because you're only going to have 2 fractions in every problem. Sometimes you'll multiply those 2 fractions together. Like in this case, this is 3/5 have something. So 3/5 is here, and say it says of those. So if they're talking about 3/5 have, and then it says of those, they're talking about the haves. They're talking about 3/5. Of those, half are kids. So then it would ask how many, what fraction have something and are kids. It would be half of that 3/5, which is 3/10. 3/5 times a half is 3/10. So that would be your answer to this one. Now, let's say instead of those, let's say it said of the others. Well, this is talking about the haves. The others would be the have-nots. So how many are in the have-not group? 1 minus 3/5 is 2/5. These 2 groups should add together to equal 1. 2/5 plus 3/5 equals 1. So of the others is talking about the have-nots. So say it says of the others, half are kids. Now it's 2/5 times 1/2. So that's where it can be tricky because you're not going to see the number 2/5 anywhere in the question. So don't just automatically multiply the two numbers together in the questions, 1/2 times 3/5, because you might not even have to multiply the 3/5. They might not be talking about the halves. They might be talking about the have-nots. And if they're talking about the have-nots, now your answer is 4/10. So your answer is either 4/10 or 6/10. It just depends on if they're talking about that group of the haves or the group of the have-nots, and it'll say of something, of the others, or of those. This is where you'll have to figure out which group they're talking about. Of the what? Of which group? Of this group or of that group? So there's a little bit of reading comprehension in there. It's a little bit of a like a logic problem. The math itself isn't real difficult. They're small fractions. You're just multiplying two fractions together. It's taking this 1/2 and multiplying it by the correct number. Either the 3/5 or the 2/5 is the whole key to this. So there's only 5 problems. See if it makes sense to you. I think the very last one will make the most sense because it's the best real life example. And then I'll go over them on Monday because I'm not going to see you guys on Friday from now on for a while. Actually Monday is Labor Day. So have a good weekend. And we'll go over some of these on Tuesday. And hopefully your brain hasn't been erased by then and you forgot everything you ever learned.